with this photograph, I did a consultation, and the mother came in, and she's, one of my children really are afraid of a camera. It just doesn't, his expression isn't the way he wants it because he needs some teeth work. And I said, well, tell him he doesn't have to smile, he doesn't have to do anything he doesn't want to. So we did the traditional photograph where everybody was looking at me, and of course they were the way they were. And then I said, let's play with the dog, and let Dad play with the dog. So I composed them this way, a nice pyramid composition. I use artificial light. I bring it with me because you see how strong the sun is out there, and we didn't want to be in the sun. So with using artificial light, I can use any time of the day. I don't always do sweet light because it's an evening and whatever reason. So when we look at the composition, we see that there is a story going on. So I was talking to them. I said, oh, talk to the dog, you know, pet him. Look at that. What a beautiful dog. Where did you get him? Blah, blah, blah. I keep talking, and then all of a sudden, this was what I got. A nice smile. The mom said, even if I don't get the photograph, I just love the experience. So that's how I get my expression. Everybody's involved. No, they're not looking at the camera. Who says you have to look at the camera? What does the word portrait mean? To portray a feeling or emotion. Not eyes, lips, fat stomachs, whatever. A gentleman came into my studio here in Victoria and he says, do you ever go to the States to photograph? And I said, of course, yeah, I would. He said, I live in Dallas, Texas. Would you fly up? I said, oh, yeah, sure I would. And then I thought, well, probably it'll never happen. And about a month later, he phones me up. I'll send you a ticket. When can you come this certain day? Because he wanted one of the, it's a blended family, and to have everybody there. And so I flew out. And of course, when somebody pays so much money, they fly you out, put you up, take you to a basketball game, take you for dinner, all that good stuff, I need to come up with something that is not traditional. And when I saw the space, I kind of knew what I wanted, but it was very sunny and bright out, and you couldn't really see the fireplace very well. But that was irrelevant because I always could enhance this like I did. But what is the purpose? Well, how can I get the kids playing together? This little guy got to know me really well, and he kept crawling towards me. I was by myself. Normally I don't do families by myself. And it was, they were looking at the kids. I said, don't look at the kids. Be happy with each other, and so on. So as I was talking, they got involved, and I took this photograph with a lot of space. In my studio, other studio, I had a guy come in with two big cameras hanging around his neck, and he looked at my photographs like about 10 seconds each. And right after he left, another man came in, and he says, I've studied art, and he does documentary photographs, and he looked at his photograph for about 10 minutes, it seemed like. And I said, what do you see in it that the other fellow didn't see in it? What do you see in it that I didn't see in it? And he explained this photograph to me, and I said, my goodness, I didn't even see all that stuff that you saw. I work from intuition. After I pushed the button on the camera, if you ask me, what did you do? I would have a hard time explaining it, because I believe and I feel that my work is intuitive. Because if I have to figure it all out beforehand, there's many things I don't see. He says, look at the echo of these two statues. Look at the U shape that's happening here. And he just went in detail explaining how this photograph worked for him. This is printed on a G clay. It's a G clay is what I'm selling more and more because of the longevity of it, and using different inks that will last because the paper is acid free. So when I did the consultation, the grandmothers weren't there, but the daughter and her husband and the little girl. So we talked about how long you want it to last. Well, they said as long as possible. So I suggested G clay to them, and they were willing for it, even though it costs a whole lot more money. I charge quite a bit more for a G clay. So when we talked about the composition, they said, well, what we see on your walls we like, so you know what to do. You're the expert, so do what you like. So of course I always start with the traditional, looking at the camera, looking at me really, not at the camera. It was going okay, but I didn't feel I had the four-generation flavor. So I like the composition, it flows very nicely, I love the little dolly there. But when I brought out the book and we started working with the book, it all came together. We can see the beautiful oval, circle, in a pyramid, in inverted pyramid, and so on. And even though it's not in the dead center, you don't want to put things in the dead center. I always say there's two things that should go in the dead center, and I hope you don't mind me saying this. The nose or the mother-in-law, they're both boring. During the consultation, we were talking about their yard, and they had a beautiful swimming pool, and they spent a lot of time outside in their yard, which is should. In Victoria, well, we don't have much winter. And so we did the traditionals, again, I always do. And then I said, well, just take your shoes off and just put your feet in the water. Now, we did not prearrange that. And normally the final photograph that I want for myself, I don't prearrange. I want it to be a surprise. So we did this. The mother came in for the projection. The father didn't. And that's sometimes a problem. I always suggest both of them coming. So she bought this at 30 by 40. Every photograph that you videotaped so far is exactly the size and finish that people bought. 30 by 40. This is 40 inches, maybe not quite 30, 28 or something. So he said to her, well, we can't see the faces. She said, but we get the feeling. We live here. We want to remember what it was like. Someday we won't be here. The kids will be moved away. But can we remember? We can remember. We can recall this time in our life. And just you can see your children enough. You know what they look like. You don't need road maps of their face. And so this is what we did, and this is what they have hanging in her home. Then she said to me after, you know what, we had to rearrange our living room around the photograph because we wanted to be able to see it from whatever angle that we're sitting. We became very good friends. When he found my studio, him and his wife walked in, and she spoke a little bit of English. He couldn't so much, but during the consultation, I went to their home to do the consultation, to see their environment. And he says, since we found you, we're going to have our photograph taken every year. And guess what? This was about 5 years ago. He's been in at least once a year with his family. And last year he came in on his 70th anniversary, 70th birthday, and he bought a 30 by 40 on canvas of himself. So every year he's been into my studio since that. So he made his promise good. What I needed to just maybe explain to you was not the composition. There's a lot happening there. But I wanted to be able to get the expressions of the mother and the daughter similarly, and the father and the son similarly. So without the consultation, I would have never been able to do that, nor would they have been able to respond to me as when the lady and her husband, grandparents came in for the consultation. She says, I don't want a traditional photograph where everybody's looking at the camera and smiling. I want something that is more artistic, that has rhythm. I said, well, our artistic photographs are lots of times painted, put on painter's finish on canvas. She says, that's great, that's what I want. I said, you have to remember that if you want this many people and you want to be able to see their faces, the faces have to be minimum a wallet size. She says, that's okay, size doesn't matter. So when we continue to talk, she says, well, I have a 16-year-old granddaughter. I said, well, usually when they're that age, they're a little boring, aren't they? And she says, yes, so can I pose her boringly? Of course, she said. And then she says, that's okay. I told her about it, people talking to each other and so on. When we got there, this boy was playing with the basketball. I hadn't even thought about doing this. So like I said, I usually end up doing a photograph that I've never mentioned or even done before, but it always seems to happen. So we did this, as you can see. I love the little boy. He's got his thumb up. Yes, I want to play too. The dog is boring. He's looking at bored. He's looking at me. This dog has got his bum towards me. So it looks totally unposed. But it took me a long time with both of my sons working with me to get it this way. Plus to use artificial lighting that doesn't look like being artificially lit. So it took a long time to set this up. But it looks natural. That's the key. And you can't do that really very easily. The bride asked me to come. I was living in Saskatchewan at a time to fly to Calgary and photograph her wedding. And I said, well, what would you like? And she says, well, I don't care what you do. But one photograph I want that is like an art piece that I can hang on the wall for the rest of my life. And I says, well, then it's going to be G. Clay, and explained the whole thing to her. And she said, that's fine, no problem. So that's what we did. So I went to wondering, what can I do that's really outstanding? Because everything up to that point was kind of what everybody does. But I walked up on the staircase, and I saw the staircase, and I thought, Well, there's a piano down there. Why don't I work with that? So if you look at it, the pianist is playing, and I got them around the piano. But you know, the hardest thing was they wanted to look up all the time. I said, don't look up, don't look up, play the piano, don't look up. So in Photoshop, I bent the staircase, I put a sloppy edge over the G clay. And if you look at the composition and so on, I'm not going to get into that part, but even though you don't see the faces, you get a feeling from this portrait, because it's an activity that brings joy to the heart. And when I was talking to them, I softened my voice, because it should be a kinesthetic experience, a feeling experience. This was a very unique photograph, because actually that's my daughter. She wanted to learn to play the violin, and I thought maybe I should photograph her at her first lesson, because it might not go any further. And I was so right. So they came in to the studio, the violinist, to teach her first lesson. Now my daughter, as you can see, she's really into it at this moment in time. And I set it up with them realizing that I'm going to photograph them, but it should be natural. She should be helping her to learn in her first lesson. So the composition, the design, the lighting, the highlights, the shadows, all that is very important. That will take another class for me to explain.